The reason I think that the leaks have been really bad is because after Capcom's data breach that occurred in 2020 in November, Capcom got a lot of files that were out. And since then, I think it's been very hard for leakers to actually get anything. So that's why when Resident Evil 4 released in 2023, the year before 2022, we got so much garbage.
The only thing I can think of that maybe people are getting this information from is that if they are really trying to lock down any information from being released, they may throw in red herrings from this, for example, like what you've been reading, to throw people off and maybe prove that they
you think Capcom wrong. You think Capcom
they could? I mean, companies do it all the time. It's happened before. So that could possibly be another theory. Again, it's just a thought.
So in today's video, we're going to be discussing what we can likely expect for Resident Evil in 2025. Now, this video is going to be broken up into 3 sections. For starters, we're actually going to go over supposed Resident Evil 9 leaks, and we're going to be breaking it down since a lot of them are pretty sus. Second, we're going to be going over everything we actually know so far, so factual evidence. And then thirdly, we're going to be doing a little bit of speculation as to when we can expect a new Resident Evil game to be releasing based on facts. So for the leak breakdown section, we're going to be starting with a leak that was handed to Andy from Biohazard Declassified that was recently showcased as new on Resident Evil, since Andy is a member of that YouTube channel. What I find very suspicious though about this leak is that this isn't a new leak. It's actually pretty old. I'm also joined by Virus the Virus since he was helping me with another video, so make sure to go check out his content. He's hilarious. But anyways, let's get started.
For starters, Resident Evil 9 will take place 4 years after Resident Evil Village, main game, not Shadow of Rose. So right there, that seems super sus. I mean, you could make the argument that obviously Resident Evil, sometimes they don't go directly right after, but it seems like the next Resident Evil definitely has to connect with Village. And since Village was continuing right from the get, like it was continuing on immediately after the ending. Like Chris was like, we're heading to Europe, BSAA, let's all go, right? We're going there right away. It would be weird for it to be 4 years later. The other thing too, that we kind of discussed, Virus, in our last Resident Evil discussion is a lot of people kind of think that Shadow of Rose, that Rose needs to show up for some reason, even though a lot of people actually forget that Rose, it was like, what, 16 years into the future? So it's actually in 2035 or 2036, somewhere around there, right? Because it was in 2021. So yeah, 2030, 2036. It's way too in the future. We're not going to see Rose. I think Rose is just in case, right? Like when we get like Resident Evil 15, whatever, you know what I mean? Like it's just more for in the future, worry about that later. So that's a little suspicious that it's 4 years after. But yeah, I'll go over it really quick and then we'll kind of give our full thoughts. Next is Leon S. Kennedy, and Jill Valentine will be the main playable protagonist. Chris Redfield and Barry Burton will return as supporting characters. Jill will be dressed more tactically, resembling her look in Resident Evil 5 Lost in Nightmares, while Leon will appear similar to his look in Resident Evil Damnation. Jill's appearance will remain the same, while Leon's will look older with an unshaven face and slightly longer hair. The plot revolves around Leon and Jill traveling to an island to investigate the company that created Evelyn in Resident Evil 7, who are now creating mass clones of the bioweapon Evelyn using the Megamycete provided by Miranda from Resident Evil Village. Chris and Barry will call Jill and Leon several times to assist them on their mission. Rose will be mentioned. Jill and Leon will become infected by the Megamycete and will experience hallucinations and hear Evelyn's voice throughout the game. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there, but what do you think about this so far, Virus? What are your thoughts?
That's a lot of information for a leak. That seems like kind of a stretch, not going to lie to you. That seems like it'd be like an actual plot of the game, but I don't know how.
Yeah. So apparently this is a playtester. There's something very suspicious here that we are going to go over, because a couple of months ago, I actually saw a playtester kind of give his thoughts on the new Resident Evil 9, and he was actually pretending to be Japanese. He was trying to speak really broken English.
Welcome.
As if a Japanese. Oh, by the way, thank you so much, Silent Hill Remake Remaster, for following on Twitch. Really appreciate it. But
love the name.
Yeah. But as mentioned, basically, this guy was pretending to have a Japanese accent, really broken English on 4chan, and basically said the leaks of all of this. And this is why I find it very suspicious, but we'll go over that a little later on. But yeah, what else do you think is super sus about this? That's a very good point, though. It's very specific for a leak.
I feel like they just kind of threw characters in there for the sake of it. I definitely feel like it will involve Chris, because that's kind of what they've been leading to for the last 2 games. So I definitely see that. Having the inclusion of Barry seems weird, especially because we haven't heard anything about him since
Revelations too. So 2010,
Revelations.
2010.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. Again, these could all be true, and who knows? But to me, they just sound kind of outlandish claims. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think that's the biggest point there that you have is that it's very specific, and it's like, why is it so specific?
Especially for a playtest, I feel like that's a lot of information for just someone playtesting the game.
Yeah, and the other thing I have to mention is that why would they mention that Rose will be mentioned? Why? Why is that important? If this is 4 years after Village, which is, remind you, it's 2021. Rose is 1 year old, so she was born in 2020, I believe. So she's 5. Why are they mentioning a 5-year-old during that time? And why is that so important for us to know? It's almost like this person that came up with this leak, or the playtester, I should say, he doesn't understand that Shadow of Rose. And like I said, this is a common misconception. A lot of people don't understand that Shadow of Rose is literally 16 years in the future, right? 2035. So it almost seems like he had this idea of, oh, Rose is going to be mentioned. Why is she going to be? She's a 5-year-old kid. You know what I mean? Like, why is that important to the story? It's almost as if she's, 4 years later after Village. So Rose is 4. It almost seems like he got that confused, but that seems very suspicious. But what do you think about that, Byers?
I feel so this could just be copium or trying to make sense of it. I feel like it could make sense to mention Rose because they are aware that Rose could potentially be a bioweapon already by this point, considering all that's happened to her within RE8. So they may have a reference to her. I don't think they'd obviously use her in any sense because she is a literal child. And then everything that gets mentioned when she's older, like I could do things that Chris doesn't even know that I could do, yada yada. I feel like that they may explore that a little bit because if they're still using the Megamycete to kind of replicate the powers of Miranda or whoever else, I could definitely see her being a factor in the story of maybe how they can potentially counteract something. But again, that's just me trying to make sense of something. We don't have that much information to go off of.
Exactly.
So, but I do see it being a plausibility, but nothing where it's like the main focus of the story is needing like Rose's genes or
I doubt it. Yeah,
because I don't know.
Yeah, they have, what's her face, dude, I forgot her name, shoot. The Ethan's wife, what's her name? It's not Miranda. Why am I thinking Miranda?
Mia.
Mia, there we go. Yeah, because Miranda was, pretending to be Mia for a couple of months. Yeah, Mother Miranda. Yeah, there's a lot of problems. As mentioned, the problem, I mean, one could also, if I were to give the benefit of the doubt, he's just mentioning it, but it's still very sus. Like, why would you mention that in a playtest? The other thing too is that, as mentioned, I don't think it'll be 4 years after the game. That seems very, like, what's the point, right? Like, they're just really like, obviously, the only times I think that Resident Evil has kind of left it kind of open-ended, where they didn't continue what they were going to set out to continue, was kind of like Resident Evil Code Veronica, where at the end of that they were like, we're gonna go stop all bioterrorism, but that was fine, right? It's not like, it's very open-ended. That scene, that dorky scene at the end with Chris in the ship, and then also with Revelations, right? Revelations at the end when it shows what's his name, Raymond and Jessica Charlotte, where they're like in Italy or somewhere in a cafe, and that's open-ended. And then obviously in Revelations 2, where we saw Barry last with whatchamacallit, Barry with Alex Wesker inside the little girl, right? Natalia. You know what I mean? Like, that's the only way where I would see Barry come back, is if it's something that's similar to what I theorized. By the way, if you guys haven't checked out that video, it's 5 things that I think Resident Evil 9 should do. That video, I kind of go in over the fact that we definitely need to see Alex Wesker make a return, and also Albert. So unless it was like that, but I doubt it, man. Like, the way, like, if you were playtesting, wouldn't that be like important information to kind of let out, and say? But that's a very good point that you said, that a playtester wouldn't have access to all of this information. Usually, what I've understanding with playtesters that they only have like a small level, basically. So he would, if somebody was playing a level for the game company, they obviously have to sign NDAs and stuff, but they wouldn't have all of this backstory. To my knowledge, I don't think that's how it works, but correct me if I'm wrong, guys. Q&A, I don't think they do too much on story and stuff. It's more like, how does the game play? What are the problems with the game?
Yeah, like you may get some like dialogue here and there that you could probably put together, but the amount of information that they gave definitely does not seem possible,
Yeah.
like in the slightest. So I don't. I wouldn't believe any of that personally. I feel like that's just a load of bogus.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Yeah. And we're going to go over why this is very suspicious, because there's other leaks that have been in the past that are very, very similar to this, and we're going to go over it. And yeah, so let's just finish up here. So Blue Umbrella will return as the good guys. Some locations include an abandoned hospital, caves, deserted houses, labs, dark forest, and a temple. Again, that's too many levels for just the one playtester. The main enemy will be an evolved zombie that sounds similar to the ganado. It says ganados, but yeah, in reality it's ganado from Resident Evil 4 Remake. There will be a stalker enemy pursuing Leon throughout the game, while Jill will be hunted by the Goat Man. So, okay. The main villains will be a man named Mr. Simon, a completely new character who supervises the mass. I'm sorry. We got to stop right there. Why is his name Mr. Simon? All right. Like, that just brings me back to Simmons from Resident Evil 6.
Mr.
Like that.
Cinnamon.
yeah, like what? Really? Simon?
Yeah,
like Mr. Simon, sorry. I even read that as Simmons because I'm like, that's it's a little too close to Resident Evil 6. The guy says a playtest took place in April and September in Japan. Basically, they added other stuff in the video, but I'm not going to go over all of that because like I said, there's a big suspicious thing here, and the fact that it says that it was done in April and September of this year. I remember seeing on 4chan on April this post where there was a guy who was saying that I'm a playtester, I played Resident Evil 9, and here's everything I saw. And he gave a bunch of stuff, and nobody in 4chan believed him. Everybody was just trashing him. They're like, what the hell is this? Get this stuff out of here, like literally. And they ended up taking out that post. Obviously, 4chan is known for getting rid of fake leaks and stuff. Like there's other leaks too that have popped up on 4chan that have been erased. So I should have taken a screenshot of that. People usually do that, but I can't find it. I actually looked at my bookmarks. I couldn't find that specific article, right? It wasn't an article. It was actually just 4chan. There was like a Reddit post that linked to 4chan, but yeah, I couldn't find it. But yeah, it was very suspicious because this guy was literally trying to speak like really broken English, like what he would think a Japanese person would sound like. But I've lived in Japan. I was studying Japanese with my friend for 2 years in high school. Like I know a little Japanese and like very little, but you can tell this guy was just completely lying. And so my guess is that this guy basically posted this on 4chan, got rejected, and then now he's giving it to creators like Andy. Now I don't think Andy, like I said, we know Andy on the channel. He's a great guy. But I do think someone's messing with him. You know what I mean? They're messing with him, and also Residents of Evil, obviously, since he's a part of that. And they're posting this. And it's not just him, by the way. There's been a lot of TikTokers, a lot of Twitter pages that have kind of just been relaying this information as if it's fact, right? I've seen other TikTokers that have been like, we just got new news on Resident Evil. And it's like, no, we got fake stuff. And nobody confirms, right? Nobody's checking these rumors out. And that's what we'll go over right now because, guys, it's pretty bad. So if we actually go a couple of months before, there's another leak that's very similar to this leak that was in April. So let's go over that one. This actually happened in, where is it? This was actually in September, and I kind of want to just read this out and kind of just see the comparisons, right? See the similarities, but the differences of it. And this is, again, why this is super suspicious. So September 27th of 2024, this is actually the NEOGAF article. I'll have all the articles in the description. I'll try to have it on the live stream, but obviously in the video, you'll be able to see that right away. It says the game takes place on Tierra del Fuego island in Southeast Asia. So that right there, it almost seems to me like this guy took what the guy said on April, which was very sus, and you know how he basically said that it was going to be very similar to the ganado? It was going to be very similar to the ganado from Resident Evil 4 in Spain. I think this guy kind of built on top of that. He probably assumed that it was going to be in Spain or was going to be a Spanish island in Southeast Asia just because of the ganado from that previous leak that happened in April. Obviously, the leaks that are coming out now with Residents of Evil and Andy and all the other YouTubers and TikTokers that are saying this is not a new leak. This is actually super old. And as mentioned, this came out in April. And then here we have in September somebody else that's saying, oh, this is a Spanish island in Southeast Asia, which for starters, that's very strange. I don't think Spain owns any islands in Southeast Asia, but okay. Apparently, and by the way, Tierra del Fuego in Spanish basically translates to Fire Island, Land of Fire. I'll continue. The main source of inspiration was the Japanese volcanic island Miyake-jima, which has a volcano that emits poisonous volcanic gas, causing all of its inhabitants to wear gas masks. The architecture of the village small town is a mix of cultural cliches from 11 countries of Southeast Asia. Main biological threat is wild mold, inspired by real life. Moldy fungus, the Toru biela. In real life, it kills insects by completely taking over the body of its victims. In the game, this fungus was used to modify the mold that we know from RE7 and RE8. The wild mold gradually covers the body of the victims, driving them crazy, and this is vaguely reminiscent to the stages of infection from The Last of Us. So, okay, so this leak is trying to say that they're going to be exactly like The Last of Us. When the mold completely covers the body, something like a furry cocoon, various creatures emerge from these cocoons, reflecting ideas about folklore, mythological creatures. In this region, white mold also covers the walls of various rooms. Near these walls, the protagonist experienced terrible hallucinations. The main character is Adrian Clark. He is a tourist who arrived on the island with his wife and son. The wife was killed by local residents shortly after the start of the game, and the son was kidnapped for unknown purposes. The protagonist is trying to find him. Sometimes Leon Kennedy, who is about 50 years old at the time of the game, helps him. His role is episodic, and he appears a little more often than Chris in RE Village. Chris and Jill Claire are also present in this game. They work with Leon, but they act somewhat behind the scenes. Probably their role will be revealed in the DLC. Okay, so again, this happened in September. So I don't know if you guys follow. This seems like they're piggybacking off of the one that was in April from this guy who was pretending to be Japanese, which is now being popularized in the month of November. So again, this is it's very sus. And the reason I say that they're trying to piggyback off of it is because they're adding something new. They're saying that there's a new protagonist called Adrian Clark or whatever. And then on top of that, we're also going to be seeing Jill and Leon. And they're going to be showing up in an episodic style. So kind of like Revelations, which I find very suspicious. Obviously, I should also mention that I think the reason they're saying this is because the director of RE9, which was confirmed in Capcom Next event earlier this year, didn't he direct Revelations 2, I believe? He also directed Resident Evil 7. And anyways, we'll go over what he stated there. That's actually what we know. This is how we know that the next Resident Evil is going to be directed by the guy that directed Resident Evil 7. So, but anyways, going back to this this leak, it definitely seems like that. But what are your thoughts, Byers? Do you think that this is piggybacking off the leaks that have kind of reemerged now?
I mean, seems like the facts are all there, to be honest with you. People take credit for other people's things all the time, so that wouldn't really surprise me if that's the case. Again, you know me, we talk about this all the time. I don't take things at face value, especially when it comes to these sorts of leaks, because things change, people lie, people just want to be heard, get their story out there. So it's hard to know what to believe and what not to believe until it eventually comes out, or at least we get some information. Like, we have very little information about this game, so people coming out with these big elaborate stories, again, a whole new protagonist with a whole new backstory already being discussed out before anything maybe official has been brought out, I feel like it always just maybe is kind of a red herring just to get people hyped about something that may not even be the case. And if I'm wrong, then hey, I'll be the first to admit it. But until that happens, kind of hard to believe these sorts of things that don't come from the Capcom themselves.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, right? I mean, like, if we look at Resident Evil 4 Remake, we got so much garbage. So much garbage. I think, like, literally 99% of all of the leaks and rumors that we got, right? These are supposed leaks. In reality, they were just fake. The only real leak that we actually got was, for starters, the Albert Wesker kind of concept art. That was real. And we also got the Capcom data breach that said that Resident Evil 4 Remake was actually releasing. Those are the only factual things that actually came out. Obviously, the one with the Albert Wesker concept art with his burned hand or whatever, with the same outfit that we see him in Resident Evil 4 Remake, that one was a rumor, right? That was an actual leak. Capcom data breach, that was a data breach. So of course we know that that's 100% true, because all the games that have released, well, most of them, we'll go into that a little later, were true. But Resident Evil does not have a good track record when it comes to to leaks, right? This is not like other games where things actually get leaked, they end up happening. That's not the case with Resident Evil. It's been a long time since that's actually been the case. And there's always, I was actually looking at all of the fake leaks that have actually released over the years, and it's been a long time. It's been a long time that Resident Evil has received fake leaks. I think it kind of what the article that I was seeing kind of was detailing big fake leaks that have happened since Resident Evil 6, I believe. Resident Evil 6 is when leaks started to come out where it was just not true. And so, but if we're just talking about recently, the reason I think that the leaks have been really bad is because after Capcom's data breach that occurred in 2020 in November, Capcom got a lot of files that were out. And since then, I think it's been very hard for leakers to actually get anything. So that's why when Resident Evil 4 released in 2023, the year before 2022, we got so much garbage. None of it was true except for that one Wesker leak. That's about it. Like everything else, the fact that there was going to get a Hookman, the fact that we were going to get all hallucinations 100%, that it was going to be just like Resident Evil 3.5. Krauser wasn't going to be a part of the game. There was no island section. Luis was going to have his own thing, own missions. Like it just kept going on and on and on about just nonsense and nonsense. So when you were saying that it could be wrong, I think just logically one could ascertain that none of this is is true. But yeah, I guess the reason I'm talking about it, and I should also state that I'm not a leaker YouTuber. I don't buy any of the leaks because, like I said, logically, why would you even believe them if most of them have been wrong in the past? But the reason I'm talking about it is because it's very suspicious, and it seems like a lot of people haven't done their homework. Let's go over, because there haven't been that many, surprisingly, there haven't been that many leaks for Resident Evil 9. But the reason I wanted to go over it is because I think it's going to get worse. What do you think, Virus? Do you think that once Resident Evil 9 kind of gets announced, do you think it's going to be like the same situation as RE4 Remake? Or do you think it'll be less?
More than likely, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's why...
That happens a lot with upcoming games, though, especially ones with very energetic fan bases. That happens quite often. So we'll have to wait and see, but I honestly wouldn't doubt it.
So we'll go over actually the first ever Resident Evil 9 leak that actually released on 4chan. So as mentioned, 4chan does have a habit of deleting their old stuff, but somebody actually took a picture of this. And a lot of YouTubers during the time of 2022, July, did go over this. And we're going to go over it and kind of see the similarities between all of these leaks. For starters, the working title of it in 2022, they said was Resident Evil Apocalypse. That's something that a lot of fans actually ascertained. And the reason for that is because in Capcom 2020, we knew that Capcom was working on a game called Resident Evil Apocalypse. As mentioned, this is factual. We know that this is true. Now, is it Resident Evil 9? We don't know. But anyways, let's continue. It says setting is a western ghost town where some investigation will take place. Caves, rivers, small town, camping place. Enemies will look like some kind of deformed creatures with heavy emphasis on body horror. They will resemble mythological creatures with horns and will be called Wendigo or Goatman by the locals. So again, here we're seeing this reintroduction of this creature, right? The Goatman. So again, do I think that we're gonna get something like the Wendigo in Resident Evil 9? No. I think that that's a direct ripoff of Until Dawn. All right, that looks literally. I haven't even beaten Until Dawn. All right, I only played the first part of it, but I know that the enemies are Wendigo. So yeah, what do you think, Virus, about that? Just from that alone.
It's kind of hard to comment on these things when you don't. Yeah, you can't tell if they're factual. Again, it's just, I don't know. I don't see them going that route, especially if they're going to be like your normal enemy type. Because the whole thing with a Wendigo is that they're very shriveled, but they're very, at the same time, long-limbed. So making that a regular enemy, unless you do very few of them, I don't see that being a factor, personally. It would be cool to see a few of them pop up, surely, but that being maybe the main type of enemy in the game, I don't think that's going to be the case.
No, and also I find it strange that it says Wendigo or Goatman. Those are two very different things.
Yeah.
Like, why are they being put together as the same thing? That's very strange. Now, Resident Evil has always kind of combined stuff. I mean, they use a lot of their inspiration from mythology, but it's never been like completely mythological, right? I mean, Resident Evil's always kind of kept it grounded, unless we're talking about Shadow of Rose, which you guys, if you watched my review of that, you guys know that I don't like that Shadow of Rose. But even with Village, right, we got the Lycans, which were like werewolves, which was very, very kind of out there. And I think that's why in 2022, this leak was kind of more believable with that, right? Like of it being, pure, it's going to be like Until Dawn. But I see too many similarities to Until Dawn. It being in America and all that other stuff, that seems very strange. But anyways, let's continue. Let's get this over with. It says says monsters can approach the player by appearing as friendly NPCs if that person died and the player didn't see it. The forest is creepy and disturbing. It's easy to get lost without a map. Sometimes you'll hear someone walking behind you, but the creature isn't there when you turn around, and sometimes it's really there. A player can force some doors open, lock them, barricade them, use breakable melee weapons. One of the first bosses is the Barghest. He's a giant black dog with a kink, but less intelligent compared to other monsters. One of the main antagonists will be a woman called the Gleistig by Loco. She has really beautiful design with green gold trim. So now we're going into like really far out. Like it's again, where did people get this information, right? Like it's very specific, as you mentioned before. But anyways, we're almost done. It says the player will get help from a woman bioweapon called the Holder. She will serve you as a guide through the forest. She will tell you some of the history of the town as you show her some treasure, keys, puzzle pieces you find along the way. She'll also teach the player different combinations of herbs. There will be 7 types of herbs that could be combined with each other to achieve various effects. The monster fear this woman just as they fear the respect the glass dig and will. Yeah, this seems. Yeah. The plot will be about 9 phases of the moon. 9th moon phase, and the nickname Apocalypse came from that idea. The moon serves as a symbol for this game and likely appears in the logo. So this is something, and by the way, I think the Resident, like the new leaks, or the old ones from April also mentioned a moon. I forgot to write that down. But again, we're seeing this moon thing again. Anyways, that was what we got in 2022. That was the first ever. And so you can kind of see, the reason I'm mentioning this is because you can kind of see how somebody would take some of those pieces and make their own leaks. And then you'll have another leaker take the pieces of that leaker and make something else, right? So we first went from America to have mythological stuff, and then there's the moon, and then we went to the other one in April where it said that there was going to be Jill, Leon, it was very specific, and then we go to, September, where it started to be very specific with Spanish, and then also have mold. And then you can also see the similarities between those 2 leaks with the 2022 and the September 2024. But the other thing I also wanted to discuss, and this is something that that is very interesting, is that in May 6th of 2024, so this is actually a month after this supposed Japanese playtester posted on 4chan, Dusk Golem stated that RE9, now Dusk Golem, for those of you that don't know, is also known as a static gamer on Twitter. He says a lot of leaks. He's also said that he's also given up on leaking for Resident Evil, and several times. And then he comes back to Twitter and says, I'm going to leave Twitter, I'm done with this, and then keeps coming back. It's a kind of an ongoing thing. I have heard that some of his leaks have been true. This is in the past, and then some of his other stuff has not been true. So he's definitely not reliable. We've kind of discussed that in the past. I mean, no leaker in Resident Evil is reliable. If I'm being 100% honest here, there's no leaker that's going to be 100%. But anyways, he stated that the RE9 would take place on an island in Southeast Asia, which draws inspiration from Singapore. Again, this is, you know what it seems to me? It seems like this is just a combination of a leak. So one leak, another one kind of built, piggybacking on top of each other. But
it's a lot of broken telephones, what it seems like.
Yeah, honestly. Like you can kind of just piece together all of these leaks. As mentioned, the ones that are recent, the ones that a lot of the YouTubers are kind of posting, not YouTubers, TikTokers, everyone, it seems like it's just a rehash of a previous leak and then another previous leak. So it seems to me like Dusk might have also gotten that information from that leaker in Japan, since apparently Dusk also has a bunch of sources or whatever. I've also heard, and I'm pretty sure I heard this on Twitter, and correct me if I'm wrong, I did hear something that apparently that a lot of leakers, a lot of their sources got basically dried up. They don't have that many sources anymore, thanks to Capcom being super locked in and not letting any leak escape from Capcom. And there's actually evidence to support this, right? Like I remember, Byrus, just a couple months ago when Dead Rising, you sent me the trailer for Dead Rising, and that was a huge surprise. Like DR. I was like, what the wait, we didn't even know about that. Like nobody knew. There was no leaks on Dead Rising releasing a deluxe remaster.
Yeah,
and that game
kind of came out of nowhere.
It literally did. And this is kind of proves that theory that Capcom has been super locked. As mentioned before, is that the reason we know that the next Resident Evil game is most likely Resident Evil 9, again, this is just a guess, is due to the Capcom data breach of 2020. We got information on Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil Reverse, I'm pretty sure, Resident Evil 4 Remake. This was back in 2020 when Village wasn't even out yet. You know what I mean? So this is how we knew all of these games were actually going to be releasing. And on top of that, we also knew Resident Evil Apocalypse. It kind of just begs the question, right? It kind of just fills in the gaps here. One could ascertain that the reason we didn't know about Dead Rising is that it obviously was worked on after the breach. So it wasn't a project that was working during the breach, like before 2020 November. It was something that was Capcom kind of worked on after, because or else we would have known about it, right? Because we knew a lot of games. I think also other games were also on that list, like non-Resident Evil. I think Dragon's Dogma 2 was also on there. But what do you think about that, Virus? What are your thoughts? Do you think that's a valid theory or no?
No, I was gonna 100% agree with you. The only thing I can think of that maybe people are getting this information from is that if they are really trying to lock down any information from being released, they may throw in red herrings from this, for example, like what you've been reading, to throw people off and maybe prove that they
you think
are
Capcom?
Wrong.
You think Capcom?
They could. I mean, companies do it all the time. It's happened before. So that could possibly be another theory. Again, just a thought. If that is something that they are putting out there, just to throw people off and be like, actually, wrong bucko. That's not true. Got your ass.
That would actually be super big brained, big
that
five
would be
head.
Big brain.
Yeah,
and I know that happens a lot. Like before the big Rockstar breach, I know they were kind of doing stuff like that too, where they were throwing people off with the information that was being given. So that could possibly be a theory as to where this information is coming from.
Yeah.
It could also, like you said, be piggybacking, which to me seems more likely from the information that's been provided. But I don't think that we'll really hear much about this game until we get a release about it, or we get another Capcom showcase and when they're ready to show it. That's what I think. I think we're going to be left in the dark for a while until something comes up. I wouldn't doubt that maybe some of the information may be out there, like who may be working on the project, because I think that may be public knowledge for earning calls. But again, I haven't looked them up myself, so I don't know.
Kind of to add to what you're saying is that what we really know so far is that we know from the data breach that Resident Evil Apocalypse was a game that they were working on in 2020.
Right.
And since it was called Apocalypse, a lot of people assumed that was the next Resident Evil. And I think the reason for that is because, like, it was Resident Evil 9 because Resident Evil Village had its own name. Resident Evil 7 was called Biohazard. But what I was going to say is that there was also another rumor that was kind of in that time that suggested that RE7, RE8, and RE9 were going to be a trilogy. And after RE8 happened, right, Ethan died. Spoiler alert. And then we got Shadow of Rose, which kind of just finished the arc. It finished the whole arc. That leak seemed to be ultimately done. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys. I don't know if that's actually a leak or if that was ever actually spoken to by like a dev. I don't remember. This is back like a couple of years ago. This is before I was actually covering Resident Evil news. But that's what a lot of people were saying, right? Like that's why a lot of people assumed that Resident Evil 9 was going to be a direct sequel and actually talk about the Megamycete. Now, one could also argue that they could continue the Megamycete arc without Ethan, and that's what these leaks seem to be kind of alluding to. That's the kind of their whole gimmick, their whole thing is that, right, like the leak that was in April that is now getting popularized by, you know, all these YouTubers is basically saying that the island is going to be where they were making Evelyn. That's the connections, right? The connections were essentially making Evelyn. And so you're going to be fighting a bunch of Evelyn kind of clones and stuff. I think that's where they're basing it off of. I think it's going to be a direct kind of sequel. Obviously, and kind of to add to that, we know from Resident Evil 8 Village that BSAA is using BOWs, which is super sus. But are we going to get the same virus? Is it going to be the same Megamycete? I don't know. I mean, that would kind of be weird because it seems to me like Resident Evil Village and also Shadow of Rose kind of finished that off. Why would there be a need to revisit the Megamycete? There's nothing... You know what I mean? Like the mold virus, I mean. It seems like that chapter's done.
So they definitely still could if they wanted to, because with the way that 8 ended, spoilers again, they brought Resident Evil all within itself. So I definitely don't not see that being an option. I definitely do seeing it being something that they could explore. I think just the story of, the Winters is definitely over. Just because with the way the thing is going with 7 ending, they said the father story will continue. 8, the father story has ended, and then I forgot. I think they said something at the end of Shadow of Rose 2. Maybe the daughter's story will continue, or something story will continue. I forgot what it was now, but I definitely don't see them writing it off the table. I definitely think it could very well be a possibility for them to revisit. And if not, where do they go from here? Do they bring in something new? Do they bring in something from the past and re-elaborate on that? I feel like they'd shoot themselves in the foot if they started so soon to bring something else up. Because again, they did bring up the BSAA having their own BOW. So I feel like if they just like retcon that from ever happening, that would leave a lot of questions as being, okay, so then what was the original plan for this story afterwards if they're just going a completely different route? So I'm not sure. I feel like they would probably, or it could be like an elaboration of how it's grown. Maybe the Megamycete, maybe it's evolved, maybe it's something else, or along those lines. Because we've had different, T-viruses and stuff like that, different iterations, I guess, of the similar thing. So they could do something in that aspect. But I don't see them differentiating too far from what's already been established. I feel like it'd be way too soon to do that already, at least personally.
I think to answer that question, you can actually look at Resident Evil Village. You were saying how like there's like where do they go off to? They say a new virus, but I think the new virus has already been shown. What we can ascertain from Resident Evil Village is that at the end, when we actually saw the BSAA agents with their helmets on, they were actually going and kind of shooting, lichens and stuff and kind of going down in their helicopters and going up or whatever. That scene where Chris is going into the village. It already gives us enough evidence to assume that all of those BSAA agents were all infected, because Chris doesn't really talk with them. He doesn't really chat. It seems we can actually see them in action going down the helicopter, shooting a bunch of lichens or doing their work, right? And then coming back and leaving. The only reason we know is that at the end, they kind of picked up a body of a BSAA agent and they're like, he looks infected. So that doesn't look like the mold virus to me. Personally, obviously the mold virus is something that kind of makes people almost like immortal, right? Like most of the time you could just regenerate your stuff. That doesn't seem like it was the same. And the fact that they were also bald seemed like they were experimented on. These are all just, speculation on what we've seen. But what I'm trying to get at here is that it seems like it's a different virus. Whatever virus the BSAA is doing, whatever experiments, it seems very different from the mold virus of what we saw in Romania, right?
Yeah,
I don't know.
very well could be. Yeah.
But the other thing that I also wanted to mention as well, we do know for a fact that Capcom does have another Resident Evil game planned. Like in the Capcom Next event, we had the RE7 director basically say, hey, I'm working on a new game. I'll be directing RE9. Yeah, Kyoshi Nakanishi, he basically stated he didn't have anything to show us. Now, his actual statement was, we're making a new Resident Evil. It was really difficult to know what to do after 7, but I found it and it feels substantial. I can't share any details just yet, but I hope you're excited for the day I can. Now, this right here, a lot of people are assuming that it's Resident Evil 9, and that would be a good educated guess, but it could also be a different game, right? Because he didn't say Resident Evil 9. He just says, we don't know where to go from here. It could be that he's working on a completely different game. And that kind of brings us back to the data breach, where we actually saw other Resident Evil games that Capcom was working on at that time. We knew that Resident Evil Hunk, or Hunku, as how the Japanese pronounce it, but in reality, it is Hunk. That game was on the list. We also had Resident Evil Outrage, which was, a lot of people actually had rumors attached to that it was going to be similar to Revelations, but it was learned after that actually seemed to be a piggybacked. So there was 2 rumors that were kind of piggybacked on that data breach of Resident Evil Outrage. So we actually don't know what that is. And then we also got Resident Evil Apocalypse. So those are games that were on the list that we never got, but as mentioned, there was a lot of games on that list that we did get. So it is possible that Capcom could have just, closed, that happens a lot in development where they're like, we'll just scrap that idea. But it could be that Nakanishi, what he said, he could be referring to those games. So maybe we're not even getting Resident Evil 9. That's still on the table.
Again, it's all speculation, right? So it's kind of hard to pinpoint what it is because we have such limited information. So we're just kind of piecing together from what we know so far, which is not very much.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We're just kind of piggybacking off maybe what we can.
Yeah.
So it's all a possibility because we're still in, who knows what stage we're in, but from our knowledge, it's very minimal, very early. So for us, it could be almost anything, honestly. I personally would like it to be another mainline game.
I see.
But I don't know. We got to see where we go from here.
Yeah, I mean, that's just an idea that I wanted to bring out because a lot of people aren't really talking about that, right? Like a lot of people are just assuming that it's Resident Evil 9, and it could very well be, right? Like again, like Byron said, this is just speculation based on facts of what we know, but it's very clear that the director didn't say specifically that he's working on the next Resident Evil mainline title, which would be Resident Evil 9. As mentioned before, we know Resident Evil Apocalypse is there, but is that really Resident Evil 9? We don't even know about that also, right? And that's based on fact of of the Capcom data breach of 2020. So there's a lot of things where it's either the next game is not Resident Evil 9, so be prepared for that. For Resident Evil fans that are just expecting the next Resident Evil mainline title, it might not be the case. Well, there was also something else that I also wanted to talk about. I've also seen a really bad argument that kind of defends leakers. So I've seen this in my chat because there's a lot of Resident Evil fans that really like leaks. They love these fake rumors. They love talking about it. Well, for me, I don't. I actually just want to say the facts, and I kind of want to say what seems very suspicious and then let you guys decide and also share my thoughts on it, right? But the one bad argument that I keep hearing, I've seen people state that games are always changing while they're being developed. So the leaker might not be lying. So basically their argument is that when companies are working, Capcom is working on a game, maybe the leak that was leaked 2 years ago, like with the American thing and all of that, maybe that was what Resident Evil 9 was back in the day. Maybe, those leaks were actually true. And so you can't say that, maybe the leaker was right. So it kind of just gives the benefit of the doubt to the leakers. But the problem with this argument and the reason why it's a poor argument is because we actually don't have facts to actually defend. Like, for example, Resident Evil 4's development. We don't know the development process of Resident Evil 4. Now, could you go and ask a dev team and ask him like, hey, was Hookman ever up on the table? Was Krauser not being in the game on the table? Was Luis section on the table? Was Leon going into paintings and like hallucinating like Resident Evil 3.5? Was that ever on the table? There's no evidence for any of that. There's no facts. There's never been a dev that's actually stated that. If anything, we actually had the director and the producer for RE4 kind of state that no, the Hookman is not in Resident Evil 4, because that question was getting brought up a lot during that time in an interview that one gaming article actually had with those guys. So again, this is a poor argument. It's not a good argument, mostly due to the fact that there's nothing that kind of suggests that that's what's happening. That what leakers say 2 years ago might have been true. If anything, it just gives the benefit of the doubt for leakers. And the reason also that it's not a good argument, if you actually believe this poor argument that leakers are actually telling the truth and that the reason that their leaks were wrong is because the game developers changed it, then logically one would actually ascertain, you would put two and two together that, oh, then that means I can't believe any leaks. If the leaks are ever changing, if they're always being, like if the development idea of a game is always being changed, then why would you believe leaks? So again, this is why it's a very poor argument. First off, as Byrus was saying, it's a cop-out. And then next, if you actually believe this, truly believe this, then you wouldn't believe any of the leaks. It's just illogical for you to do that, because if it's ever changing, if it's never consistent, then why would you listen to them? Why would you even give them the time of day, right?
Yeah, you're kind of proving your own argument as invalid. But
it kind of collapses on itself. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
exactly.
Lord Vygar says these games take years to make after every aspect is finalized. It's not like a character in the FMV. Scenes pop into existence within a day. Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm not arguing that a development takes very short time, right? Obviously, games take several years to make. But this argument that games are ever changing, and so therefore you have to give a break to the leaker, no. Because then it's like, don't believe any leaks then. If you're believing, the argument doesn't work, right? It just doesn't. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. But kind of moving on, I've also seen a lot of speculation that kind of suggests that we're going to get news of Resident Evil 9 at the Game Awards. Or sorry, let's be even more vague about that. The next Resident Evil is going to be brought up at the Game Awards. What do you think about this, Byrus? Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think it's kind of a little too late for this year?
I don't know, man. The last time they said they were going to do that a few times, we haven't gotten anything. So at this point, I think they just kind of hold out to their own company directive, like at their own shows now, because it's like it doesn't, like, almost every single company has their own, at least big AAA companies have their own showcases that they do now. So I feel like them giving stuff out for free is kind of, I guess it would be invalid for them to do, because like, why would they drive anything away, especially if you're going to present something now and let's say they do it in April? That's 4 months. I don't see them really presenting anything there, because then okay, oh, it's announced, okay, now they're going to build up hype when they do their showcase, they're going to show something there, and then if they don't, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot. So I don't really see them doing that unless they have something that they can at least provide. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. It has happened before. But I don't know. I just don't think that's gonna happen.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people that believe the hype of leaks are always looking at the next big event. Oh, it's the
For something to come out.
it's PlayStation State of Play. It's the Game Awards. It's the Tokyo Game Show. It's the German Game Show. It's it's the Game Awards. It's the next State of Play. It's the next, and it's the next, and it's like, bro,
is what it is.
Yeah, it's definitely copium. You know, I was also seeing one about a year ago. There's one YouTuber who's like, if this doesn't happen on the State of Play, you guys can call me a clown. And it's like, all right, you're writing a lot on that. You're writing a lot on saying stuff like that. Like, really, but it does seem a bit kind of ridiculous to kind of assume that everything is gonna, they're gonna get another thing. And also, you brought up an excellent point, because we were kind of talking about this the other day, and it's like what do you think the timeline is? Like, for example, what if the next Resident Evil does get announced next year? You brought up an excellent point that about GTA 6, right? I don't know if you want to go over that.
Sure. So I was saying, because Westgard brought up a point mentioning that there may be a scheduled release, or they would expect to maybe see something in 2025 near the end of the year. I said I don't know how plausible that would be, considering GTA 6 is scheduled to come out near the latter half of 2025.
Yeah.
And let's be real, that game is going to change the industry. It's going to change a lot.
Yeah. Like,
more than a bit. It'll shut the world down for a while. I 100% believe that. So if you decide to release a game around that time, specifically within the same month,
a lot of competition.
You are inevitably you're setting yourself up for failure, because let's be real, everyone and their mama is going to be getting GTA 6. So if you release anything in the latter year that maybe isn't, like, even in the holiday season, let's say GTA 6 is scheduled to release October, let's say mid-October. You decide to plan your release for a holiday season, let's say sometime November, December, you're still avidly shooting yourself in the foot. It's going to still have, people are still, like, companies are still going to do it regardless, because they got to get, their shares in, right? They're sitting on money by not, or they're losing out on money by not releasing anything. So I get it. It's going to happen regardless, but I think you are inevitably going to shoot yourself in the foot and hurt your sales regardless, because everyone will be buying that. It's the most hyped game of the decade. I have no problem saying that. So I think if you release anything around that time, no matter how hype or big or exciting your game is, no matter how much marketing you do for it, it will not perform as high as you think it will, just because of GTA 6 in general. That's how I feel. I could very well be wrong, but I don't think most people will disagree with me on that point.
Yeah, Lord Vlaglar brings up a good point. He says it appears a Resident Evil game comes out, that once a Resident Evil game reveal comes out, it releases at least a year later. So I don't think we would get RE9 until November of 2026 at least, which I think, Lord Violet, that's an excellent point.
That is a
and
good point,
the reason being that, if we look at the previous Resident Evil game, that basically got announced on June 2nd of 2022. And I don't remember what was the event for that. Was that the State of Play, or was that something else? It must have happened in June. It could have been Summer Games Fest, right? I don't remember.
For which one? Resident Evil 8?
No, Resident Evil 4 remake.
Oh,
the first
4?
Trailer. Oh, it says State of Play.
Yeah, it would have been in the summer, I believe, because then it came out the following year.
Yeah, it says PlayStation State of Play 2022, and that's when it released on June 2nd, and we didn't get Resident Evil 4 until March of 2023. So a little bit less shy of a year, but it's still a long time. So I think that's a very excellent point, Lord.
Give or take 8 to 9 months, about roughly.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think too, when it came to Separate Ways, was that like around 6 months or something like that? Like, again, it's very similar.
It was about halfway through its life cycle, I believe. Yeah, within the year.
I think Shadow of Rose was like a year, wasn't it, from Village? Because it was October.
Shadow of Rose was definitely a longer wait than it was for Separate Ways, because Separate Ways came out fairly shortly after. I remember that.
Yeah, it came out October.
I don't have a specific time frame, but I remember it coming out a lot sooner than it did for.
Wow, it released actually pretty fast. So we got, I think I remember that. Yeah, it was pretty quick. No, so we got a presentation of State of Play. This is what Google says, on September 14th of 2023, and the DLC and the Mercenaries both released on September 21st. So just like a couple weeks after.
Oh, wow.
Like a week? What is that? And then Shadow of Rose, I actually want to see the release date of that. Wait, hold up. Was October, 2022. And Village came out in May of 2021, right? So yeah, that was a little more than a year, right? Because I remember they put out like a thing basically saying, we're still working on a DLC. I like how it has the Japanese romaji here. It says Shadozu Oburozu. That's funny. But yeah, so as mentioned, that's a very good point that Lord Vlagar brought up. If we do get info next year, I don't think we'll get it until the next 8 month at least, or in an hour, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't get too hyped on it. We're definitely getting a new Resident Evil game, but is it going to come out soon? No.